Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar for Disruptive Business Risk is Equal to Cyber Risk, Met or Not Met. Today, we have a few agenda items: cybersecurity, healthcare, PCI, ISO, SOC, and CMMC. The learning objectives we're going to go over are the status of compliance and cybersecurity today, cybersecurity risk, and compliance and regulatory risk. We do have the chat open. If you have any questions whatsoever, we're happy to collect those questions and make sure that we respond to them after the webinar concludes. So make sure you gather your questions and submit them to us. I'm so excited to introduce our speakers to you now. On our next slide. Our webinar today is presented by our three speakers: Dan Porter, our EVP of Cybersecurity at CyberGuard Advantage; Sajid Pralis, our EVP of Security Risk and Compliance, also at CyberGuard Advantage; and Mike Turpin, Director of CMMC and Assessment Services at ecfirst. We'll be starting with our first topic, which is cybersecurity. Here to discuss cybersecurity with you is Dan Porter, our EVP of Security at CyberGuard Advantage.
Thank you, Sophia. The first topic I want to talk about is the state of cybersecurity. It's rapidly changing and evolving. It always has been, but it's getting faster and faster. One of the key trends is still ransomware. It continues to target organizations globally, but we're seeing a shift from regular ransom attacks for money to actually focusing on data theft. There's just more value in it. And it used to be that they would ransom large corporations with big pockets. Now we're seeing the shift to small and medium-sized businesses becoming particularly vulnerable because they actually have less money to spend on defense. We've got key things like artificial intelligence playing a dual role in cybersecurity, both on the offensive and defensive side. And then we see AI from the offensive piece doing things like sophisticated phishing attacks, deep fakes that are becoming increasingly difficult to detect. All right, I know this is a busy slide, but we want to talk about Internet of Things a little bit. These are things like the Ring cameras, your locks on your doors if you have those, security devices, refrigerators, video recording devices, but it also for industrial IoT devices, things like robots and such. We're having a lot of attacks on these types of devices. It's an essential attack surface that nation-state cyber attacks are focusing on because they can disrupt our critical infrastructures. They can gain sensitive information. And so we have a rise of attacks in these areas. But despite these challenges, we have some positive developments. We have comprehensive cybersecurity strategies being implemented that include zero trust models and multi-layered defenses that help mitigate these risks. Additionally, we're having a cybersecurity workforce that is growing at a rapid pace. It's just it's the career to be in, and the skill gaps that remain are slowly closing so that we have the capabilities to defend against these attackers. Let's go ahead into the next slide there. Last thing I wanted to wrap up with is an ongoing cybersecurity assessment or cyclical process. Things like autonomous pen testing that's continuously running, continuous running vulnerabilities assessments, and of course your periodic, whether it's quarterly, semi-annual, or annual pen tests that are critically needed to protect your environments. The external pen test, of course, is your pretty standard testing from the outside in, but we're seeing most attacks come from the internal side. Somebody falling for a phishing email, for example, is the number one way to enter an organization. And then you, of course, have things like malicious employees, things of that nature. The last thing I wanted to talk about is web application pen testing, or some layer of application testing. It's something that is often overlooked, but testing your company's website, your company's applications to ensure they are secure are critically vital to security. So overall, we want to have a cyclical, ongoing security program Typically, that's done in part internally as well as externally, so third-party attesting that these controls are put in place, especially when it comes to compliance standards. Thank you for your time today, and I'm now going to pass it over to healthcare.
And introducing healthcare is Mike Turpin, the Director of CMMC and Assessment Services at ecfirst.
Hello. Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate that. Let me begin by touching on HIPAA. HIPAA, as we know, has been around since 1996. Consists of three core components. Of course, the privacy rule, which really established a national standard for protecting PHI. It covered the use and disclosure of PHI by covered entities and grants patients rights over their healthcare information. Then we have the security rule. The security rule really focused on how entities had to protect PHI, provided all the administrative safeguards, the physical safeguards, the technical safeguards. And then we had the breach notification rule. And breach notification actually broke it down to where it defined what was unauthorized access. How do you use or disclose PHI? What about requiring notification of the Department of Health and Human Services, or maybe the media, or maybe the FBI, or who do you notify, when do you notify, how do you notify? Went through all the risk analysis process, the policy development, how do you implement all those things? How do you train your staff on them? Audit preparedness. How do you prepare for audits? OCR likes to come in and say, hi, welcome. We're here to see what you're doing and why you're not doing it correctly. And then there were a lot of penalties that came for non-compliance. HIPAA really gave us the best practices, really provided the means for all agencies to get that consistency across the board. Next slide. When it came to the scope of the HIPAA mandates themselves, we talk about the scope of the mandates. What did the privacy rule really cover? It highlighted everything, how it applied to healthcare providers, health plans, healthcare clearinghouses, and how it required them to implement those safeguards to ensure the confidentiality and integrity of protected health information. It also provided for patient rights. It told patients what they had the right to have companies release, they had a right to protect, what needed to be corrected, what needed to be stored, how it needed to be stored, how long it needed to be stored, and really broke down those privacy pieces for individuals. When it came to the security rule itself, we provided that overview of the safeguards required. Access controls, audit controls, integrity controls, transmission security, that helped prevent unauthorized access to PHI. And of course, like I mentioned with breach, that was explaining, things like how covered entities notify the media. How do they notify HHS? What is the timeliness of breach notification? Is it within 60 days according to HIPAA? That was generally the guideline. But then different states, different rules, different laws changed that. Some were 3 days, some were 72 hours, some were a week, some were 2 weeks. But it really set the foundation. And then we started rolling into ransomware and HIPAA compliance and things like online tracking. Next slide. Online tracking, these are the scripts or codes that are embedded into websites or mobile apps that collect user data and monitor interactions. There's a lot of cases in healthcare where it's pulling PHI. Maybe what kind of appointment is being made through a website. I need to see this oncologist because I've got this. How are cookies tracked? How are web beacons? How are tracking pixels grabbed? What about fingerprinting? All these applications within healthcare, which were, supposed to help access for online tracking, but there were some things that need to be controlled. How do we control? A hospital might use data analytics to determine how many cases of COVID-19 were, vaccines were put out during a particular area, a particular time. But that also could be some information that could be misused, some identity theft, some stalking, some harassment, So there's a lot of pitfalls of some of that information. And there have been some significant fines from OCR for online tracking and how it actually flows. Next, please. Then we get into ransomware. Everybody loves ransomware. We've all heard it. We've all seen it. There's lots of things that have gone on in the media regarding it. We've seen hospital systems shut down, pharmacy systems shut down. Ransomware, it's that malicious software to block access to systems. We can't perform surgeries because they blocked us out of all of our Internet of Things devices. And it has become more frequent, more sophisticated. It is the top cybersecurity threat across all industries, not just healthcare. But it's something that hospitals, healthcare facilities need to be aware of, need to be prepared for. How do you run your backups? Preventive measures to avoid attacks, making sure you're locking your systems down, making sure you're teaching your staff, make sure they know what the incident response plan is, and they understand how things need to happen. Make sure that things like backups are happening on a regular basis. Network segmentation, so if something does happen, it's segregated from everything else. And train the staff. They are the front line. They are the first level of firewall. So make sure that employees are trained to know what to look for, to know what not to click on. Make sure that they understand. And then you have the patch management, making sure your systems are up to date, and make sure that you keep that and that you test those patches before you put them into production to verify they're actually working the way they're supposed to work. And then the big one is testing. If you have a ransomware risk management process or plan in place, make sure you test it. I have seen some wonderful, wonderful plans, but they've never been tested. The best plan is when you test, find the flaws, fix the flaws, remediate the flaws, then test it again. And you run those ransomware drills. You check for compliance. You check for breaches. How do you restore? That's always the one part that is forgotten when it comes to ransomware. You caught it, you fixed it, but how do you restore to normal operations? That's always the one piece that's missing. Next slide. One of the biggest things that we use to stop or to help companies prevent things like breaches is HITRUST. HITRUST is the Health Information Trust Alliance. It's a common security framework. It's comprehensive. It's not just for healthcare, though. This is, it includes HIPAA, NIST, ISO. All these different foundational pieces are put into place for the HITRUST methodology. It's very structured. It's tailored to the company. Do you need New York standards? Do you need Nevada standards? Do you need HIPAA? Do you need NIST? Do you need AI? All of those pieces flow into HITRUST and become part of a HITRUST assessment. They provide that unified compliance. It's one audit, one report. It's certify once, report many. So you have one report to provide to multiple agencies. And there's different levels of HITRUST certification. There's the E1, very small, just cybersecurity, basic cybersecurity. Do you have it in place? Then you have the I1, which is a little more. It really takes about 3 to 6 months to complete. It's ideal for organizations who are just starting a HITRUST journey. And then you have the R2, the 2-year certification, which is that moderate or highest level of assurance, depending on how it's factored. It takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months to complete. A lot of resources, internal resources are needed to complete it. You will need an external assessment agency to help you get certified. But it really allows organizations that handle large volumes of sensitive data to learn how to protect, to ensure that they are protected. And it's streamlined. The thing is, it's built for your company, no matter the size or the strength of it. Next slide, please. It's prescriptive. That's the big thing. It cross-references to several different regulations, like I said. It covers that that HIPAA, the NIST, the ISO. It's one single comprehensive framework that helps you manage compliance. It's, as I said, there are 3 different levels. There's the E1, the essentials. There's the I1 implemented, and then the R2, which is the expanded 2-year. That E1, of course, 3 to 6 months, I1, 6 to 9, R2, 9 to 12. It goes from 44 controls all the way up to over 500. I have seen them as high as 700 to 800, depending on what is factored into an R2 assessment. But they really provide the highest level of assurance. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over at this point.
We're going to cover some other common data security compliance standards now. These are ones that all types of service providers need to comply with, whether it's healthcare, financial services, in all other industries. We're going to start with PCI. The payment card industry data security standard is a pretty robust data framework. We've outlined some of the 6 main goals that it tries to accomplish and broken down into 12 requirements. This was founded by the major card brands and maintained by the PCI Security Standards Council. So it helps with securing cardholder data, specifically meant for cardholder data. But this framework it's a pretty good framework that can be used by anybody as to enhance their security posture. Again, it's a must for any entity that either transmits, stores, processes cardholder information. And they must comply with it. But again, a good framework, very prescriptive one for general data security hygiene. This is assessed annually, just like most audits. The versions are updated pretty regularly. Current version is 4.0. So for people that are in the process or that have gone through PC audits, I think you know that the jump from version 3 to 4 was quite a big one. Go to the next slide. So just a little more on PCI. There are 2 main types of reports. There's a report on compliance, or ROC, or the self-assessment questionnaire, SAQ. They both they end up with AOC, attestation of compliance. But a ROC is something that a QSA firm, qualified security assessor firm such as ourselves, have to do. But the SAQ is something that the entity can produce themselves, or you can have a qualified security assessor do it for you. If you're in this, if you're a merchant, you may have the option of doing either one. But generally, for a service provider, from the letter of the law standpoint, from PCI, you can do either ROC or SAQ, but sometimes to get that added comfort, the service provider's clients may require a ROC. We've seen that quite a bit. Even though the transaction volumes are low, service providers are being pushed to do a ROC. So why do PCI? First and foremost, you have to do it if you're in the cardholder data ecosystem. It is a good framework. We have seen some clients adopt, maybe not all of it, but a portion of the framework to have as their regular data security hygiene. It's a pretty good framework that way. And then also, it reduces business risk. It can be a competitive differentiator if you're not required to do it. It reduces business risk by enhancing your foundational data security controls. So there's a lot of benefit to having a framework such as PCI. Our next one that we are going to talk about is ISO. So the common one for data security is ISO 27001. It is an internationally recognized data security certification. So if you're working with any international organization, ISO 27001 certificate tends to be the first thing that they ask for. Even though a seat at the table or to bid with these RFPs, that tends to be required. It's a good framework that provides a foundation, especially for policy process documentation. ISO 27001 is very process heavy, very documentation heavy, so that gives you a good foundation for all of your policies and procedures. Control coverage as well. So it has control section built in, so it gives it a good foundation overall. As with PCI, ISO also does updates. The latest one was in 2022, so we're under ISO 27001 2022 version currently. The certificate itself, it works a little different than PCI. For instance, this is valid for 3 years, but each year you do a surveillance audit, so to make sure everything is in conformance. But the certificate itself is valid for 3 years. There are other bolt-ons to 27001 that we see today, getting more prevalent. So ISO 2717 and 2718 cloud security, cloud privacy are being added on, or being required to be added on by our clients' customers. We see that quite a bit, as is ISO 27701, the privacy privacy controls. There's also ISO 22301 that we see quite commonly. That is the business continuity ISO standard, and we have getting a lot of requests for ISO 42001, the new artificial intelligence management system. So that one is not an accredited audit right now. It'll be accredited very soon, but a lot of companies are getting on that since they're using AI in their environment, and they want to show that they have something around AI specifically. All right, and then the next slide. This is just outlining a typical ISO certification audit cycle. So from your pre-audit to stage 1 to stage 2, and then certification and the surveillance years, and then year 1, year 2. Just a quick graph on what it is. Again, just like the others, why get it is required, maybe through contractual obligation or just industry standard. Like I said, international organizations, ISO is the first thing they ask for if they're even entertaining conversations with the service provider. This can also be a differentiator. We are seeing more and more organizations in the US, mostly who are working with international clients, but others as well, doing ISO as a differentiator. Sometimes they might have SOC or PCI, and they're adding ISO. So a lot of these days, there's a lot of these organizations do multiple assessments, but can be a differentiator as well. And also cybersecurity insurance may reduce some of those depending on the provider. Any type of independent audit assessment gets premium reductions in most cases. And the next one we're going to go to is the SOC audit. SOC is the de facto standard in the United States. We are only going to cover SOC 2 here, given the cybersecurity theme of this webinar, but we do quite a bit of SOC 1 assessments as well. The SOC 2 has 5 coverage areas, or what we call trust services criteria. Security is mandatory. The others can be added as needed or required. Security over confidentiality, as an example, is something that we see for all SaaS providers. Privacy and processing integrity, depending on client requirements, industry, can be added as well. And these can be added on later years, so you don't have to do everything within 1 year. Both the SOC 1 and the SOC 2 have a Type 1 and a Type 2 report. The Type 2 is the one your all clients are needing. That's the one you can get assurance on. But the Type 1 is a point in time that you can create until the Type 1 comes around. An optional general use SOC 3 report also can be generated after the successful completion of your SOC 2 Type 2. There are, and we go to the next slide. There are additional audits that you can do with the SOC 2. So we have the SOC 2 pluses. SOC 2 plus HIPAA is a pretty common one that we do. SOC 2 plus high trust was used to be common, but with the introduction of the High Trust E1 and the I1 that Mike mentioned earlier, the High Trust Alliance has indicated that this may no longer be supported. So that may be going away. The SOC 2 plus CSA is gaining popularity with clients and with our customers of our clients, requiring a deeper look into the security in the cloud. Again, why get it? Pretty similar themes to PCI and ISO: contractual requirements, differentiator, reduction in cybersecurity insurance premiums, and so forth. The common theme with all of this is all of these data security and compliance efforts do help reduce business risk by helping to increase the security posture of an organization, especially needed given today's threat landscape, as Dan mentioned earlier. So it's something that definitely helps all organizations. I should say, if done right. We have seen a few, shall we say, GRC tool-based SOC assessments out there that were not up to the same quality, so that may give you a false sense of security. But nonetheless, for the overall, these do provide a good foundation. However, we also need to mention compliant does not mean secure. We tell our clients, organizations that follow good security practices, compliance should be a byproduct of that, but not the flip. So compliance does not mean secure. As a service provider, you may be asked to provide more than one audit. So we do a lot of SOC 2 plus PCI, SOC 2 plus PCI plus ISO plus HITRUST plus, there's a lot of combined audits that happen. So test ones, comply many type approach is what we try to do on those ones to save some cost and audit time. As a service consumer, your vendor risk management systems processes may require one or more of these audits. Using a service provider these days that does not have an independently tested audit or certification may open you up for risk and added fines or litigation in the event of a breach.
Okay, now going over to the next topic, we've got CMMC, and we're going to turn it back on over to Mike. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. The CMMC model itself was developed as a framework by the Department of Defense to enhance the cybersecurity posture of the defense industrial base. It's required for all contractors and subcontractors doing business with the DoD at time of contract award. So it's not like you got to have it to bid, you got to have it to be awarded. It covers mandatory compliance. It talks about providing a competitive advantage to all companies because it's leveling the playing field for everybody that's bidding on those, for everybody that's awarded those contracts. When it comes to, there are 4 phases to the assessment process itself. You have to plan and prepare the assessment. That is 75% of an assessment. If it is done correctly, the rest of the assessment is a piece of cake. Plan and prepare can take you a week, it can take you 4 to 5 months, depending on the complexity of the organization seeking certification. But if done properly, when it comes time to conduct the assessment in phase 2, it goes really, really quickly because so much is there already that conducting the assessment is just validating what you've already seen. The third step, of course, is reporting the assessment results, reporting them to the organization seeking certification, reporting them to the C3PAO and the DoD, and then closing everything out in phase 4, closing out those POAMs, closing out any open items there may be there to actually fully generate a certification. The CMMC model 2.0 consisted of 14 domains, 110 practices, 320 controls. You had to pass all controls to pass all practices to be certified. So it's a triennial, level 2 is a triennial third-party assessment. It's required of all level 2, anybody who deals with CUI. It's based on NIST 800-171. The ecosystem itself, you have the Cyber AB and you have the CICO. So the Cyber AB is, they're the ones that actually that authorize the C3PAOs. They are the ones that authorize the RPOs, the registered practitioner organizations. They're the ones that manage the registered practitioners and the advanced practitioners. And you have the CICO itself. They're the ones that train the CMMC certified professionals and assessors. They're the ones that work with the licensed publishing partners and the licensed training partners to create all the training material to get those assessors certified, to provide the assessors to the C3PAO. So it all kinds of rolls into the C3PAO itself.
Thank you so much for attending our webinar. If any questions are submitted, we will, of course, respond to them. Keep an eye out. If you submit your address, we will be sending you a complimentary t-shirt. And then also keep an eye out on your inbox for that complimentary ransomware readiness infographic. Should you have any more questions and want to reach out to ecfirst or CyberGuard Compliance, you can see our contact info on your screen. Reach out at contact us at cgcompliance.com or at info@ecfirst.com. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. We hope to talk to you guys again soon.